All right, welcome back to the podcast. I guess origin stories.
Do you want to? Are we
Let's
starting
start from
over?
yeah, yeah. I already deleted the footage because I had to clear up my SD card. But this is. I used to work at a nursing home, and John Barker here was the owner of that nursing home. Probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I think because how it was structured and ran, it didn't feel like there was a hierarchy of class, I guess. Everybody was treated equal. And I don't know, it was just the best. I have a lot of fond memories working there. So I thought we could do an origin story for you. And, you know, where you grew up, brothers, sisters, kids, what did your mom and dad do? How you acquired the nursing home, all that stuff. No pressure.
Sounds good.
Go ahead.
Start?
I guess we're okay. We'll start with a couple. Where were you born? And
So I was.
When were you born?
So I was born in Wisconsin Rapids, 1957, and it's a small town in central Wisconsin. We moved to Madison when I was 8 years old, so I consider Madison my hometown. I don't remember a lot about the Rapids, although one of my closest friends is from there. So I moved to Madison, went off to college when I was 18, and was in music school.
Well, hold on. We're skipping from 0 to 18 really quick.
Okay.
What was your childhood like? Would you say overall?
I don't know. I guess, as they say, I won the birth lottery. I had, two parents that loved me and provided for me, and I have an older brother and two older sisters. So, we had a really nice life. Maybe I didn't always think that at the time, but
sure.
But we had a real good life, and yeah. I don't know what else there is.
Good memories though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Some people I don't
Absolutely.
know. So you're the youngest, did you say?
I am.
Okay. How was that growing up? I'm an only child, so.
My brother was 4 years older than me, and he was the next oldest. So even by the time I got to high school, ninth grade, he was gone. Although he kind of was back and forth. He'd live at home here a little bit, but for the most part, when I was in high school, he didn't. So
did you look up to him?
My sisters were, long gone. They were 6 and 8 years older than I am. So my oldest sister left when I was 10, and we were never super close. But and part of that just because she was at the time so much older than me and went off. So
sure.
So yeah, I was kind of through high school, anyways. It was like a single child.
Yeah.
And I like to say, in my own case, we have 3 boys, and I like to say the nice thing about having more kids is you try to make the first kid perfect, so you screw them up by trying to make them perfect.
Yes.
By the time you get to your third child, we gave up on parenting.
Yeah.
And I think my parents somewhat too. I think my oldest sister used to always complain that I had it so easy compared to her, because I didn't have a curfew or things like that. My folks would just say, hey, go on out and call us if you're going to be out past midnight and tell us where you are.
Nice.
So anyways, but I felt like for the most part, nobody was really around when I was growing up. So.
Did you look up to your siblings a lot?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
My brother and I are very close, and my sisters and I, not as much. Part of it probably is being girls. They kind of, supported each other more, and they both moved to Colorado. So geographically, they were gone. But I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my brother and I used to fight like dogs, but but he's one of my favorite people in the world now. I mean,
what's your brother's name?
My brother's name is Rick.
Rick. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. What did your mom and dad do?
So my dad owned a driving school.
Oh, interesting.
That's why we moved to Madison. He was in the gas business, worked for his father in Wisconsin Rapids, but then we moved to Madison for him to start a driving school, a business he did, for whatever reasons, decided he wanted to do. My mother stayed home with us and typical of that era,
Sure.
took care of her kids.
That's
stuff like
awesome.
that.
What are your parents? What are their names?
Miles and Kathy.
Miles and Kathy. Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, and my dad died in 2008. My mom in 2014. So they've been passed away for quite a while now.
Yeah, man. Okay, so I know you went to Juilliard. Am I pronouncing that right? Mm-hmm. Juilliard. Okay. When you were 18, though, you didn't go right there, right?
No.
So remind me again.
Well, I moved to Cincinnati. Went to the Cincinnati
That's right.
Conservatory of Music, and that's where I met my current wife, Jan. And then we moved up here. She went to law school, and I started working full time in the nursing home, nursing home. So, and then I went back to school when she was done with law school and was working. Then I went back to Juilliard and was there for a few years and graduated from Juilliard.
How was that experience? I know that's kind of people dream of going to.
It was a wonderful experience for me. I was glad I was a little bit older, going to New York City. And at that time, Juilliard didn't have any dorms, so you had to live in the city. And for an 18-year-old to live in New York City has its positives and negatives, but it's a lot. That's a lot. For me, I was 27, and so being older, I think made it easier. But I loved New York. I loved the school. Loved everything about it.
Was it overwhelming? Being in the.
Well, it's incredibly competitive, but I never felt overwhelmed by it. I mean, certainly there were many anxious times, but it's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and you for the people watching, you play the upright bass.
Correct.
Is it fretless?
Double bass.
Double bass. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, which is awesome. John played a lot. He's the owner. He was an administrator. He played music for the residents there with my boss, I guess, Lisa Amsler, who was the activity director. And I don't know, it was awesome. Everybody that came there was like, to have the owner be the administrator and just you memorized everybody's name. You genuinely cared about every resident and their needs during especially we'd have those, I'm forgetting it, the group where the residents would get together if they had any concerns. Resident council. How could I forget? I don't know. It was just, if they had a concern or something that, they needed fixed or whatever, you were on it and, you put them first before money. And it was always putting their needs first. And that's so rare to not always be worried about the bottom line and, how, it was just, and putting the staff first too. I know, during COVID it was tough, but you always made sure everybody was taken care of, and everybody still talks about that you're remembered fondly by everybody. And I really appreciated it.
Yeah. I did. I mean, I believed that if you take care of the residents, the money will take care of itself, but don't let my I worried about money plenty.
Right.
Part of the reason I'm retired now is there's a certain amount of responsibility with that, a lot of responsibility, and the responsibility of taking care of the patients. And it just added up over the years and wore me out. And of course, COVID kind of piled on the last couple of years. But yeah, for me, I loved the residents. That's what I liked it. My first job in a nursing home was in 1978 in Cincinnati when I just needed a job, and I got a job as a janitor in a nursing facility and immediately loved the residents. It was a brand new facility. There were only four residents, but immediately loved that aspect of it. Still didn't ever think I'd end up in the business. But when we moved to Minneapolis, then or St. Paul, then I decided to go back to work when my wife Jan was full-time in law school, and got a job as a housekeeping manager in the nursing home up here. Actually, the one I ended up buying.
Wow.
So ultimately went into bankruptcy, and I bought it out of bankruptcy some 11 years after I initially worked here.
Yeah.
So I do it, but I just enjoyed the residents, and I just felt like, hey, they're the ones paying me. They're paying our salaries.
Yeah.
They're the boss ultimately.
Yeah.
Them in the bank.
Right. Well, it was.
Anyways, and and the employees have to take care of the residents, and if as much as I think in our society we believe, hey, no matter what's happening personally, I'm a professional, and I'm not going to let that get in the way. But your personal life does get in your way. If you're
For sure.
angry when you come to work about something that happened anywhere, it shows. And so I tried to make it a good place for employees, and a good place to work for employees, because I felt that promoted better care of the residents.
I remember telling Lisa, I had, something would be happening in my personal life and I'd be crabby, and then I'd get to work, and 5 minutes later, it's like my mood just changes immediately. When you immediately, like when you go into something like healthcare, or, you're providing help for people in need, you forget about your own issues that maybe are probably minor but feel like some big thing, and then you go into a nursing home and start helping these residents, and you completely forget about your own BS that you're dealing with, and realize it kind of gives you a good perspective. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So you were working as a custodian or janitor in the St. Anthony Park home, right? And then at the time, from what I'm hearing, it didn't have like a great, I don't know how to say it. Like, it didn't have a great reputation, would you say?
No, it didn't. When I was a janitor in Ohio, but when I moved here at it was called Commonwealth Healthcare Center at the time. I went to work for them, and I got the job as a housekeeping manager. And about 6 weeks before I came there, they were on the front page of the newspaper with a roast infestation.
Oh.
And so it was an older building, and it was kind of a problem child for the corporation that owned it at the time. Then they hired an administrator, Joanne Prophet, who ended up hiring me, and we've been lifelong friends. And she really turned it around.
That's awesome.
Over the next couple of years, and stuff. But it was an old building, and so it
needed some.
Had a lot of things going on. But it was also fun. I mean, you worked there. It was a challenge. But it was
awesome.
It's a cool place.
Yeah.
It's a nice neighborhood. It's a nice location, and
would you say when you bought the nursing home, do you think it was like an impulse buy, or had you been thinking about it? Was it kind of just like, yeah, I'll buy it, or did you take a few weeks to think, or was it kind of like, how did that process go?
Well, like I said, in Ohio, I worked for a multi-facility corporation. When I took the job at Commonwealth, it was called then, they were a 20-facility organization. They ended up selling it to a company called Beverly Enterprises. Some of your older listeners might be familiar with them, but at the time, they were huge. They were the biggest nationwide facility. They owned over 1,000 facilities.
Wow. Jeez.
And then they sold it in 1983 to a company out of Indiana called Vantage, who had, again, maybe a dozen or 15 nursing facilities. And then they went into bankruptcy. But I always was frustrated working for larger organizations. Interesting that I sold it to a larger organization, but they were the only people buying. But
sure.
I always was frustrated working with larger organizations. I always thought they were penny wise and pound foolish, so to speak. At least in the maintenance department, they do things half-baked just to get by, and then it wouldn't work. And I remember they decided to get air in the stairwells, and they spent $30,000, and it ended up not working. And even code-wise, you're not allowed to have, air coming in and out of a stairwell. It's got to be completely independent. So just things like that. They just didn't really listen. Buying things, you had to buy it for them, I remember they decided, I said I needed new housekeeping carts. They bought them for me. None of them fit in our closets, in our utility closets, because this was the kind that they made a deal on, and that's what they wanted.
Sure.
So they sat there until ultimately they let me buy the ones I wanted to buy. And, so for a lot of reasons like that, I just always thought, if I love this, if I do this, I'd want to own my own facility. So I always was interested in owning my own facility. When I finished up, after Juilliard, I spent a couple of years trying to get a job in an orchestra, which I was not successful at, and decided to go back into nursing homes. I knew I wanted to own my own facility. And when I heard this one was in bankruptcy, I started working the deal.
Yeah.
So it's something I always wanted to own my own facility. I always felt like, I could do it better.
Yeah.
Whether that was true or not, I don't know, but that's the way I felt. And when the facility I found out it was in bankruptcy.
Perfect.
I just went for it. I just never lifted my head. I get asked that question a lot, but I just never lifted my head. I never dreamt that I would fail, even though looking back on it, that was incredibly possible.
Yeah.
That I would, but I didn't. I survived, and I say that to this day. I wasn't an owner; I was a survivor.
Yeah, yeah. That's one thing I see a lot in entrepreneurs and business owners is like never even thinking about failure, just the possibility of success, and so it's something I need to practice. But you were talking about all the different like codes and the stairwell and stuff, and it just reminds me of the times we butted heads, and I thought like, well, why this shouldn't happen, and blah blah blah. So much goes into owning a business and thinking about being responsible for so many employees and residents and codes and red tape that like it helped me a lot in understanding that like, okay, Jake, pump the brakes. Like there's other factors here that go into play other than your feelings about a certain situation. And it helped me, grow as a person and one thing too is, yes, you were the owner of the nursing home, but you would always keep your door open and listen to people's complaints if they have anything that, they didn't like, or you would sit down and talk with them and hear them out. Even if, nothing comes of it or you disagree or whatever, you still give them the opportunity to voice their opinion without, without disciplining them. And, because it happens, the more people build resentments and feel like they can't, there's no bridge of connection to the owner or the higher ups. It becomes a toxic workplace. So I always appreciated that in you, especially.
And I was happy to listen, although, and I wouldn't on purpose, although there were times legitimate and you had legitimate issues, there were times things did happen. Maybe people didn't know it or it might have happened in the future. But, as the owner, I always felt like I can't just let every employee come in. Otherwise, I'd have no one working there because ultimately, and
everybody would be fired.
Yeah, that's right. So you work through those, but you have to be able to listen. And I think, take things with a grain of salt. I remember a housekeeper came into my office once and he was upset about something and he started swearing at me. And George Anders, who Jake knows well, was a crusty, wonderful maintenance guy, but got me in trouble more than a few times with his sharp tongue. But he was there, and after the meeting, he said, "I can't believe the way he was talking with you. You didn't fire him." And I was like, he was upset.
Yeah.
He was blowing off steam. I'm big enough to be able to recognize that.
Right.
There's a line that people can cross with me.
Of course.
But his thing was just, he was really upset. And, he called me. But, it's just, I'm big enough to deal with that.
Right.
And, the next day I talked with, his name was Joe again. And I said, "Joe, how you doing?" And he said, "I'm better today." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm glad you came and talked to me. Next time, try to stay a little more relaxed, okay?"
Yeah, seriously.
And he's like, "Yeah, and he was a real quiet guy, and stuff. But you got to be willing to, to let people
blow off some steam.
blow off some steam here and
For
there.
sure.
Yeah.
So I think I was at the nursing home for 8 years, something like that. And I remember specifically, I didn't have a car at the time or a license. I kind of went through a rough patch in my life. You know, my dad died and had some other issues. And I remember going in for the interview with Lisa. And at the time, I was working at Subway, and not that those aren't, a job's a job, but I remember walking back to the bus stop down by 280. No, anyways, but getting a call right away from Lisa saying, "Yeah, I think we're gonna hire you, and you're gonna make this amount of money." And I was like in tears as soon as I got off the phone, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, how cool is it gonna be to say, I work at a nursing home in activities, hanging out with the residents." Is one of my proudest moments to say, I work, especially at St. Anthony Park Home. You hear all these things about horror stories of, those big chain nursing homes or government ran nursing homes. But to say you work at St. Anthony Park Home, and for you to, I don't want to say it was just you, but from going from kind of a tough reputation and hearing the stories about, what it used to be to how it completely turned around, and to live and work at St. Anthony Park Home was the best. It was I don't know, I can't really express how cool it was. And it was a pivotal moment in my life where it was kind of the turning point, going from this, I don't want to say degenerate, but this crummy, no direction guy, to all of a sudden I felt like I had a purpose and I was helping people. And then just also, a good job is, a lot of times it depends on the people you work with. And I feel like everybody there was awesome. I mean, there was obviously a couple where it was, whatever, but I loved it so much. And it taught me so many valuable lessons throughout my whole life that'll stay with me. But what do you think was the hardest things you had to deal with being an owner of that nursing home? I'm sure COVID, but
Yeah, COVID was a challenge, but in general, we're highly regulated, and the regulators, that's a challenge. It was always when we'd have our surveys, which Jamie's familiar with.
Oh my gosh.
And that's for those of you listening, that's when the health department comes in unannounced. Usually there's a handful of people, 5, 6. We had up to 12 one time, people, and they would be there all week, literally all day, not usually overnight. They came in on the weekends, and they're there to survey your care. Perfectly legitimate to do that when the government's paying for probably 2/3 of the patients that are there in some way, shape, or form.
Keep going. I'm just going to restart the...
And so those folks were there, but dealing with that was always harder on the staff than it was on me. I was worried more for staff, because my goal in life was not a perfect survey. It wasn't. I always believed you take care of the residents and you do a good job, and the regulations will take care of themselves. And for the most part, for 31 years, that philosophy worked really well. In fact, it really always did.
Yeah. And
it's not that we had a couple challenging surveys, but nothing ever on the care side that was terrible, and a lot of very good surveys. And when I say surveys, you get deficiencies, and so I'm talking about the numbers or the type of survey they are. Like, I never wanted to get skin decubitus ulcer deficiency, so we put a lot of time and effort into that, or bed sores, it's more commonly known. And while we had it a couple times in the 90s, we really never did after that. But the regulations during COVID, the regulators changing things, just the way it's operated, the government's philosophy is we're going to hammer everybody on the head, and hopefully the really bad people will leave. Yeah. But we're just going to hammer everyone to try to get those bad actors. And that never worked. The bad actors just hire good attorneys and things like that. So I think the regulation side, OSHA was an organization I never particularly liked, just the way they operated. very secretive. You had no options. They claimed you had an appeal option, but you didn't. And I really feel like
Unfair.
I really feel like they misused their authority. And but that's just my opinion. But you had the city coming in, you had the state, you had the fire marshal, the health department surveys, all this stuff happening, and just those things probably wore on me. Yes, did we have things happen with family? Sure, residents
Oh yeah, I forgot
that
about.
I'd have to work with, but I always, those were things I got to deal with on my own terms and correct. And it's interesting. Those are things you get surveyed on too. And I never had a deficiency for not dealing with complaints or things like that.
Right.
I wasn't always good at the paperwork following that. And the health department brought up that a few times, but I said, hey, find someone with a complaint that I didn't deal with, and knock yourselves out. They never could, and they never did. I always felt like every single person, family, or resident that came in with an issue, I resolved it in one way, shape, or form.
I still remember, you'd get whispers of like, is that the state or is that the health department? You'd see vans or two people walk out of their car and it's just family, but everybody's paranoid because we're overdue for
right.
Yeah. And then I remember the pages over the intercom. Jake, call 516 or whatever. And Lisa would be like, the state's here. You gotta blah, blah, blah. Is your name tag on? Yes, Lisa. But I still think to this day, I mean, you were like the overall boss, but I tell Lisa this. She's still easily probably one of my favorite bosses I ever had. She kind of just would lay down the law, and the rules are rules, and it kind of was awesome because it weeded out the like you said, the bad actors. And a lot of times we had it'd be me and Sean, which was like awesome, or me and Andrew, or Olivia was amazing. So the ones that were just there to kind of get a paycheck didn't last, and you can kind of tell. And but yeah, Lisa was awesome, and she was strict, and but yeah, it was just the best. I think Lisa's and she cares too about the residents, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited for her. She's moving to Texas and eventually.
In about a year, I think.
Yeah. So that's going to be awesome. And hopefully she gets some time to relax and just hang out. I feel like she's paid her dues in the nursing home world. And so what's next? I mean, we went through COVID. It took a toll on everybody. And, you've been at it for years with owning the nursing home. And you kind of, I don't want to say you called it quits, but you retired. I feel like you paid your dues, and it was time for you to enjoy life without the stress of the state and health department. And
I worked in the industry for 38 years and 31 as the owner administrator. And as I said earlier, it just it added up over time. It was like sediment that piled up on me.
Sure.
The responsibility and COVID piled on, and it was just time for me. I'd always wanted to work until I was 70. My dad basically worked until he died. I'm 66 now.
Okay.
But, COVID just, we had, by the time I left, we'd had 115 cases. About half of those, actually less than half of them were resident cases, but we had 11 deaths that were attributed to COVID of residents. And that was my responsibility. That was my thing, and I took it personally, and I felt it was my failure that those folks died from that, even though intellectually I don't believe that.
Right.
But in my heart, it did, and that took a toll. Families were all supportive. Every family of the residents were supportive during COVID of the facility and of me. I did work very hard to communicate with them, even on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So it wore me out. And I really didn't realize that until after I retired, how much that responsibility had worn on me.
Yeah.
And I still, to this day, I wake up every day and I'm glad I don't have the responsibility anymore. It's the world's a young person's game, like you, Jake. And
No, I don't feel so young, but
you need the energy and you need the new ideas and you keep going. When you getting, at my stage, it was like, I don't like change anymore. I don't want to tackle the next huge regulatory change,
right.
which were numerous over the years.
Yeah.
Every way from how survey happened to just all kinds of things that would require hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to implement.
Yeah.
On a lot of people's part, not just mine. So I said, I just, got to the point where, again, new ideas, and new energy, and it was time for me to move on. And, we're busy. We have a couple grandchildren and our kids, and we're visiting.
That's
and,
awesome.
And I've been able to take back up my music career, and not only my bass, but now piano.
Yeah. Sounded good from what I was hearing.
So I spend, I spend a lot of time at that. That's my kind of go-to hobby. And we have a boat up in Lake Superior. So in the summers anyway, spend some time up there.
Do some sailing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's just odd. Your whole life, you're going forward, you're raising kids, you're going to school, you're doing this and that. And all of a sudden it's like, where'd the time go?
Yeah.
And,
yeah. You kind of beat the game.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I survived the game. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So, but it's kind of like all of a sudden, and I don't know. It's weird. I really miss the people.
Of course.
I miss the actual work, but I don't miss the responsibility of every resident and what can happen to them and things like that. I'm relieved that I don't have that anymore.
Well, yeah, I remember during COVID, it was like, we had to wear the gowns and the mask and the shield and gloves and take off gloves and take off gowns on each floor. And it was tough.
Yeah.
And then having to also schedule visits from the family through the window with the residents, and then clean off the table. It's like we were doing, as a team, everybody was doing as much as we could, like it's hard on the families to not be able to see their mom or dad. And so there wasn't a right, I feel like we were doing everything right, even though it sucked. Like, I didn't want to have to do all that stuff. I'm sure you didn't, but it's, trying to keep the residents safe. And it was brutal. Yeah. But
it was when I did my daily Zoom visits with the families, and I did those about 3 months in a row every day. And I used to say we look like a sci-fi film.
Yeah.
You walk in here, everybody's
E.T.
Everybody's walking around in gowns and masks and shields, and and everything in the hall is white, and it was a surreal feeling, but that's the way it was, and
you were there 7 days a week.
I was for a lot of months, actually, for almost 9 months. But if I felt like the staff being there is the most important thing, and if I can't be there, then why would they want to be there?
Well, that's what I'm saying too, is, that's why you're such a great owner and administrator. It's like you led by example. Yeah. You didn't just be like, well, I'm the owner, I can just, hire someone and, work 4 days a week. And you were boots on the ground in the weeds, just like all the rest of us.
Yes.
It was working at that nursing home literally changed my life and taught me so many life lessons. And the aspect of owning a business, even though I didn't, I cared about it a lot. And I don't know, you led by example, and I just, it was really cool. And
I tried.
Seriously, it was awesome, and everybody loved you there.
It was a group effort. A lot of good people there, and there's still a lot of good people there. Some people like you have moved on, but there's and it's. I told people over and over again, I'm not the one giving the care, so thank the staff. But that's what I tried to do, was get a staff that was trustworthy and that really cared. There might have been other issues with the staff person. I remember Jake being so upset. We had a pool nurse that used to come there. Her name was...
I'll bleep it.
Kathy.
Yeah. Sweetheart, very sweet.
And
but
she really was an excellent nurse. And,
Yeah.
and she worked a lot of jobs. And
Yep.
she would, for lack of better words, fall asleep at the desk.
Yeah.
And this was a problem. And I used to walk by her and say, Kathy, wake up right
Yeah.
now, and a lot of nursing homes, probably in mine in the first 10 years, it was like if you were caught sleeping anywhere, you'd lose your job. But, she was right out there. She wasn't going in a resident room and crawling under the covers. And Jake came in my office. He was so mad.
I was pissed.
Because something was happening in the dining room and there's Kathy back
Oh,
there.
yeah,
and,
that's right.
And he's like, what if this person died or something like that? And I said,
Yeah.
you'd be a problem. But Kathy, it would be a problem, Jake, and I'd be in trouble. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't, but Kathy is an excellent nurse.
She was.
She just worked too much,
Yeah.
and she didn't go off and fall asleep. She just at the desk
She owned it.
and he's like, but what about everyone else? And I said, you're right. If we all did that, that wouldn't be good, but
Yeah.
we're not all doing that,
Yeah.
and I took the thing with Jake that, just because someone else, do you decide what you're going to do in your life by what other people do? Because if we
Right.
all are going to do that, we're all going to go to the lowest possible denominator and none of us will
Right.
ever do anything.
100%.
And what I talked about, and I said, yes, and I talked to Kathy and I just said, you got to try to stay awake, which she didn't, but then I talked to everyone, hey, everyone just keep waking her up. You see her, wake her up, because Lisa was frustrated with that too. But I was like, I have to make a judgment. And you know what? There's a lot of other people that have come through our doors to work as temp agencies people.
Not nearly as good as Kathy.
Not nearly as good as Kathy.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Not the nurse that she was in taking care of residents. And so, but
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if that was the hottest you ever were when you came to talk to me,
I don't know,
but
there was a couple
it was
times.
probably the top two.
Yeah, I'm just, Mandy's still there, Lisa's still there, and those two alone, I feel like
Yeah.
Lisa can lay down the law, and she puts the residents first, like you did. So I think the nursing home is still in good hands because I still talk to Lisa on occasion. She's just the best.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I mean, I guess last question, like, what's the plan for the future? Just stay retired and enjoy
Yeah.
life,
Yeah. I mean,
hang out with family.
visit. We try to visit our grandson, Felix. Jake has a Felix too as well. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that.
Yeah, no,
People
don't care.
don't want to know about, but
They already know about him.
But he's in Omaha, so we're going down there Memorial Day. We try to see him at least once a month, or that's our goal. Sometimes it's every 6 weeks, and they come up here too. But we try to see him. My youngest son just moved to Scottsdale, and he called me up.
Arizona?
Yep.
Nice.
In early April, and said, "Hey, Dad, would you help me move down there?" And I was retired. I could take 6 days off. We drove down in his car and
Yeah.
unpacked his stuff, and I helped him for 2 days set up his apartment, and he's starting a new career and a new job down there. And
What's he doing?
He just graduated with a master's degree in prosthetics and
Oh, wow.
orthotics from Northwestern. So he actually
Wow.
designs and builds prosthetics for people, legs, and he got his residency down there in Arizona at a company called Limb Lab. And,
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome.
And so, anyways, he was excited about that. But it's a long drive. So, but being retired, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could say 3 weeks ahead, sure, I can be gone and then I can turn around and do this, or
Freedom.
If you need to stay an extra day, for Memorial Day, we're going down Thursday, coming back Tuesday instead of going down Friday and coming back Sunday.
Yeah.
So there's things like that where we can do much more quickly, but I love being at home.
Yeah.
And just being here traveling is harder for me as time goes on. We're taking the kids to Scotland, all the kids to Scotland
Nice.
as a treat at the latter half of July, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we weren't retired. And then my wife and I joked because she's had a couple knee replacements, and it's like I sit there and wonder, how'd we do this when we were working?
Right.
How'd you get along? But sometimes this stuff just happens more when you're retired. And obviously we're older, so our bodies don't last forever. So we're having some of those issues to deal with. And
Gosh,
really
that's
just,
nice though.
yeah, just really want to spend as much time as we can with our family and you know, keep going.
Be present and enjoy the moments with
Yeah.
your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as I get older, the days start getting shorter, and I become less and less present in the moment, which kind of sucks. It feels like more responsibilities are added as
Yeah.
I'm getting older. So it's given me hope that as you know, when I retire eventually, I'm gonna be able to kind of let go of some responsibilities and have a little more freedom to do the things I love. Not
Yeah.
that I don't love doing what I'm doing now, but
No,
it's cool.
I loved my career, and I'm proud of my career. In fact, my brother likes to say, you know, hey, he calls me Ruben. It's a long story, but he said, hey, Ruben, he goes, you're irrelevant now, just like I've been for 5 years. And we are. I mean, that's the reality to the world. We're just, you know, retirement, you know, it's no longer our game that's driving the economy.
Sure.
Our generation, which is probably a good thing. So you move on, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. But also for me, you know, a lot of my work was who I was, and I'm still reconciling that you know, if I can't be working, am I worthwhile at all? But again, you know,
I think you've left behind, and not that you're gone, but like I think you'll have an amazing legacy.
yeah.
And will always be remembered, especially at the nursing home and St. Anthony Park in general. Last question.
Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered when you're gone?
I've never thought about that. I just hope I'm remembered as being a decent person to other people.
Yeah. Love that.
You know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it.
Well,
You survived.
I did.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake.
John, I really appreciate it. Again, you were probably one of, if not, you know, you and Lisa are my favorite bosses. And it was such a privilege to work at the nursing home, and really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, you're very kind, Jake. The reason it was a good place to work was because of people like you and,
come
Lisa
on.
being there. So
I'll
I
pay
throw
you
it back
after.
at
Thank you.
Yeah. That's right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, share, whatever. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.